Zimbabwean legislators have called for an increase in funding for tuberculosis programming amid reports of drug shortages. Tuberculosis programming in Zimbabwe mainly depends on donor funding and has not been spared by dwindling funding. Speaking on the sidelines of a TB orientation meeting for the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Health recently held in Kadoma, legislators noted that shortages of drugs could reverse gains made over the years. More in the following report.
While tuberculosis treatment is free in Zimbabwe, challenges such as drug shortages result in patients encountering catastrophic costs in defaulting. TB remains one of the biggest killer diseases in Zimbabwe, especially among people living with HIV.
The presentation that was done by presenters, you find out that government is not giving enough resources to curb the issue of TB. I want to promise that as we go back and start working on the budget for 2025, that's one area where we need to make sure that the Ministry of Finance allocates a specific.
With thousands getting infected in the country every year, Zimbabwe can only end TB through increasing domestic funding.
The disbursement of that amount. We don't want to hear big figures that will never be disbursed, and yet our people are in need of this medication. They are in need of getting tested. The machines has to be working all the time.
Government admits the drug shortage could derail gains made. Each year, nearly 4,000 people lose their lives to this preventable and curable disease.
Over the past few months, Zimbabwe had been experiencing shortages of TB medicines. We are happy to announce that as ministry we have received stocks for at least 6 months of TB medicines.
In the face of the ongoing drought already threatening the TB gains, Zimbabwe faces a mammoth task to take charge of its TB programming. For ZTN Prime, I am Mirira Nsingo.
ZTN correspondent Mirira Nsingo caught up with Donald Tobo, director of Jointed Hands Welfare Organizations, to discuss more on the TB treatment issues and how critical it is for authorities to find ways to ensure that the patients do not default on their TB treatments as a result of expected reduced donor funding. And this is what he had to say.
It is very important that the country and the government in particular looks at the issues around TB drug stockouts that are happening in the country, because the minute a person stops taking their drugs, it means either they become resistant to the same drugs if they then come because they would have stopped. So adherence is critical, but for adherence to happen, it's important that we have adequate stocks and adequate supplies. So the government must then ensure that domestic resources do support medicines, because the more we rely on donor funding, the less sustainable medicine supply is in the country. Definitely, with a serious, retraction around that, because you then realize that those that were adhering will no longer adhere, and those then can then move on to the next second line. We then start to have lots of DRTB patients coming on board because of these disruptions. So it's really critical, and I implore government to really look at this seriously and ensure that we address this ahead of time, because this is a serious disaster for the country.